Northern Ireland, a small step to a giant adventure. Book your next giant adventure at discovernorthernireland.com.
Good day, everyone, and welcome to this event looking at rebuilding tourism in Belfast. We have a great panel to join us today, and I'm just going to let them introduce themselves. So please, over to you, perhaps first, Noreen.
Thank you, Terry. Delighted to be with you and looking forward to having a really good discussion today. My name is Noreen Hegarty. I chaired the Recovery Oversight Group for Ireland. Essentially, this group was established on foot of the Tourism Task Force that came up with some recommendations in a very short period of time last year after the pandemic hit, because as we know, the tourist industry has been so severely affected and continues to be in that survival mode, hopefully facing into recovery sometime soon, but there are many variables still in that equation. I sit on the board of Tourism Ireland, and I've just left a role as Vice President of Digital Content with Lonely Planet. That's the world's largest travel media publisher. I was in that role for the last couple of years, and with the company for 7 years. We were acquired, and the senior leadership team, of which I was a part, moved on at that point following transition. I do some other things in terms of advisory boards and some things related to tourism, but a lot related to media. So that's pretty much my background.
Great, thank you very much. Well, we look to your sort of international oversight as well to help us through today's discussions. So, Catherine.
Hi, Terry. Also good to be able to join the panel today. I'm Catherine Thompson. My day job, I am the Chief Executive at National Museums NI. We have 4 museums in our group. In Belfast, the Ulster Museum. About 8 miles outside Belfast, outside Hollywood, we have the Ulster Folk Museum and the Ulster Transport Museum. And then over in the west, we have the Ulster American Folk Park. Before I worked in the museums, I actually did 10 years at Tourism NI. But really today, I suppose I'm here as the chair of Visit Belfast, the marketing body for Belfast and the Belfast region. It's a partnership, a real public sector, private sector partnership. We work with support from Belfast City Council and Tourism NI, and we work alongside Tourism Ireland and 500 businesses within Belfast and the Belfast region. I do, with Noreen, sit on the board of Tourism Ireland, so I'm very interested in the discussion that we're going to have today.
Great, thank you very much indeed. Chris.
Yeah, okay. Hi, I'm Chris Armstrong. I'm the Assistant Chief Executive of Eastside Partnership. That Eastside Partnership's a East Belfast-based regeneration charity, which has been going for 25 years this year, actually. Basically looking to improve the lives of people and places in East Belfast. We work across arts, heritage, greenway development, education, poverty programs, physical regeneration. And then I suppose what warrants me being here today is we established a community-based tourism body, development body, non-profit in 2016, pretty much off the back, a bit of a catalyst from the launch of the Conswater Community Greenway in C.S. Lewis Square. But quite early on, I think we realised the link between regeneration and tourism, and the fact that two are actually should be joined at the hip and are now for us. So we're very much involved in tourism development, but through that lens of regeneration. I also, with Catherine and previously Harry, sit on the board of Visit Belfast. I'm quite new to that role, just there under a year now, but massively enjoying it. So yeah, also looking forward to chatting about this.
Great, thanks very much. And last but not least, Harry, I suppose everyone does know who you are, but for those who don't.
Yeah, okay. Thanks, Terry, and hello, everyone joining us from wherever you might be in the world. My name is Harry Conley. I'm the chairperson of Féile and Phobail, the Festival of the People, Ireland's largest community arts festival and summer school, of which this panel discussion forms a flagship part of. As Chris mentioned, I was formerly a member of the Visit Belfast board for 6 years and currently a member of the Tourism Ireland board along with Catherine and Noreen. But in my day job, amongst all of that, I'm the director of Fáilte Feirste Thiar, which means Welcome to West Belfast. And we're a tourism promotional and development organisation in the west of Belfast, very much mirroring and complementing the work that Chris does in Eastside. And we work very much in partnership over the last number of years to very much connect the city also. So delighted to be here to take part in today's conversation.
Great, thank you very much. Well, I'm going to kick things off and just give a very short presentation looking at some trends, particularly some paradigm shifts that are happening in tourism. And then I'm going to invite our guests to comment on just how much these shifts are reflected in what they're seeing and what they're working. And then after that, we're going to enter into some rather more specific discussions about particular questions associated with tourism in Belfast. So looking at this rebuilding of tourism in Belfast, perhaps, just reflect on this. I think this is a very interesting, stimulating quote. We all know that COVID has exposed that, lots of the fragilities in our industry, but I thought this was quite an interesting statement. COVID's exposed the emptiness of destination slogans and the silliness of destination branding, whilst amplifying the importance of a destination behaving well and managing its reputation. So the emphasis shifting, if you like, away from empty promises that often brands imply to the idea of reputation management. And another quote, this one from Future Laboratory very recently, where they're saying, look, we've spent our time fretting about the new normal when we should be talking about the new extraordinary in tourism. The pandemic has precipitated scientific advancement, championed innovation, and ushered in a new age of collaboration, challenge, and accelerated change. And I think we're all very aware of those different dimensions of what's happened. But are we seeing not an evolution in the way we think about tourism, perhaps more of a revolution that, post-COVID, can we take things slowly and evolve, or do we have to start thinking more revolutionary in the way in which we start dealing with tourism? And so to just let me explain, here's a few quick points, and then I'll look at these paradigm shifts, which are reflective of this change. Well, I firmly believe that revolution is happening in tourism. COVID has accelerated that. Paradigm shifts are taking place. New ways of working has to happen. There's a power struggle taking place in tourism, very definitely. The leadership for regrowth is moving away from the public sector. Responsibility is increasingly being taken by what I call the new pirates and communities. There's disruption to the traditional way we've thought about tourism destination management organizations. We're certainly going to have to find new ways of measuring success in tourism, and clocks won't go backwards. So, paradigm shifts. Hybridity is everywhere. That we're going to have to find novel, unique, authentic experiences and solutions. Blurring is happening. It's going to be really, really difficult for tourist boards to start accrediting some of the types of experiences and products that are emerging. Is it a hotel? Is it a museum? Is it a garden? I don't know. Frankly, I don't care. It's bloody good. And therefore, it poses questions about the future legitimacy and relevance of tourist boards and the way they accredit things. Outliers are rapidly becoming mainstream. The who'd have thought it idea is emerging mainstream very, very quickly. We've talked for a long time about collaborative experience creation, but that's going further. It's co-creation with our guests before they even arrive. It's asking them what they want from a visit to Belfast, or what they want from one of your museums, Catherine, and how do you deliver that? COVID has exposed the ecosystem that's been inherent in tourism. And we've often talked about tourism's ecosystem. Well, now's the time to really work on codependency. Transformation, the boldly going where no one's been before, will be expected. Elasticity is evident in the markets and in organizations that are succeeding. By elasticity, I mean fluidity, flexibility, agility to move quicker, change quicker, respond quicker. There's certainly a lot of repurposing going on, the finding of new uses for old assets. Talent is going to become more important than skills in tourism. What do I mean by that? Well, you might have a really good night porter in your hotel, but he could be the best violinist or fiddle player in the village. And actually, being the best fiddle player might be more important to you in the future than him being a good night porter. So we've got to start looking at talent and how we mine talent. And then finally, as a paradigm shift, we're recalibrating what we mean by value. Value is no longer just measured in terms of monetary value. It's measured against a whole raft of motivational interests amongst visitors. So 10 paradigm shifts, and I'm going to ask the panel what they think about those. And are they really disrupting the status quo as much as maybe I think? So who'd like to kick off on that one? We're just going to have 5 or 6 minutes of, are these real or perceived shifts? Noreen, I saw you nodding your head to a couple of them at least. Which ones did you respond to?
I was nodding. I thought it was a very comprehensive and spot on list, Terry. I was nodding in agreement. I don't think there's anything there that I would leave out. I would add digitization, because I think, you know, that's hugely important. There's an expectation that all of this can be done seamlessly in a digital environment. And I think the point you made about creating those experiences even before you come, and that level of collaboration that will be required, is really important. And I think engagement, you know, if you think back to, you know, the notion of just getting lots and lots and lots of visitors, it's not about that now. Yes, it's about shorter breaks. People are taking their time, you know, they don't have that much time to take, but it's about high value for the destination. And in order to achieve that, it's got to be a top class experience. And I think, you know, coming out of COVID, we're coming into a hyper competitive environment. You know, there's a lot of pent up money to spend. There is a lot of money to spend on marketing to be attractive. And what people are looking for could be very different to what worked in the past. I also think that there is a tie-up here with the future of work, because that's something that's really being examined at the moment, and whether people want to spend time in destinations working. In the past, digital nomads were kind of, you know, hippies who worked in a freelance capacity. Now this is people at a very senior level within companies who've realized that they can work remotely, and what's attractive to them, where do they want to be, you know, how can we offer something different in that regard as well. So I think it's rethinking everything that we thought previously. You know, I love the notion of the revolution, because I think it is, and I think the question we're asking ourselves now is our aspiration just to rebuild back what we had in 2019, or is this an opportunity to recognize a changed world, and a world that will continue to change, and how we deliver to it?
Okay, we're going to talk about specifically about those opportunities in a minute. But Catherine, I mean, you're dealing with a big institution, a highly respected institution, a dispersed range of sites. Are you seeing some of these factors common across the work that you're doing?
I mean, but Terry, you came up with a hugely insightful list, as ever, and I think nobody can argue with the fact that COVID has been massively disruptive for everybody. But I think within that disruption, there is massive opportunity as we come out and build back, as Noreen says, and it's about building back better. And I'm interested that you talked about there being a shift from destinations putting out slogans to actually building on their reputation. And I think that is where there's opportunity. I think previously as destinations, we have talked about the importance of tourism for the economy, and it's all about jobs and spend. But I think that as we build back, we have to look at what is much more sustainable in terms of recovery. And actually, it's about the social impact, and it's about the economic impact. And there's a real responsibility around being greener and more inclusive. And I know that both Harry and Chris will have something to say about neighbourhood tourism. But when you talk, Terry, about the fact that people are looking for these outliers, these unique and authentic experiences, that's where I think in Belfast there's massive opportunity for us going forward, because we are a small city and we're a very manageable city, and it's easy to get around. And I think that going forward there is huge opportunity in that space if we can actually take the opportunity of COVID to pause, to rethink, and to build back better in a more inclusive and a greener way.
Okay, and again, in a minute, perhaps we can explore, Catherine, some of the specifics of that, and perhaps what you're thinking of doing within the National Museum structure. Chris, and then Harry in a minute, perhaps just, were there one or two of those headlines that particularly resonated with you or captured your imagination that you would like to reflect on more?
I think probably the one that stood out for me is the concept of co-creation, just because I'm a bit of a those buzzwords get me going a little bit, because I think they can be overused, but I actually think the genuine co-creation is actually a very difficult process, even from being involved in neighborhood tourism, where the perception is we're at grassroots, we're on the ground, actually thinking about stories, the stories you want to tell, whose stories they are you the best people to tell them? If you're not the best person to tell them, then who is? How do you empower people? I think it's funny because we're talking about tourism, but actually all those questions are inward looking in terms of the place and how the place develops. And I think genuine co-creation, we struggle with ourselves as an organization in East Belfast, just to constantly go back to, well, what is this the right thing to be doing for East Belfast? And then is that the right thing that people want for in terms of visitors moving in? And those two don't necessarily always marry as well. What we think we want for visitors in terms of economic activity doesn't necessarily match up with what is the right thing to do for a locality, a place. And I think that's really important, just to say that co-creation, whilst it's vital, is a difficult nut to crack.
Yeah, I don't think any of us would dispute that, but the best things in life are probably always the hardest ones to try to find that solution to. Harry, I mean, you working in the community again, and a recent bit of work done for you, benchmarking, showed that you and Chris and your organization's doing many things well, but in that list of shifts, which are the ones that perhaps you would like to focus on in the future?
Yeah, I suppose just picking up on some of the comments others have made, this notion, and Catherine and Noreen both referred to it, of building back better has been near enough the slogan for our industry. And the other big slogan that stuck out for me over the last period of time has been timing and tone, about how we get it right and when's the right time to invite the world back into our communities and our cities and our homes and all of that. But I think there was a real rush at the beginning of lockdown, maybe last March, April, May, when no one really knew what was ahead of us, when we thought we were going to lock down for 2 or 3 weeks and the world would stop and this thing would pass. Here we are 18 plus months later, new variants, and God knows where we're going to be for the next number of years and what's coming at us. And then we see that building back better rather than building back is actually a real possibility, because power and where power resides, I think, has absolutely shifted and has absolutely changed. People that you would never think could work remotely or from a cafe or from a laptop or whatever are looking at 4G connection to be able to work from a beach and do a report from there, or to zoom in from there and whatever else. So work-life balance and life-work balance has completely changed as well. So referring all of that back to your list, that notion of elasticity and fluid, while a lot of sort of buzzwords we may have thrown about as people are marketeers and move into those different spaces, they all have real meaning now in the new world that we find ourselves. So the big thing for me, in terms of community and neighborhood tourism, is that it's been really apparent, I think, over the last 18 months, actually, even as a city, not just in west or east or city centre or north or south or anywhere else, how important it was to welcome people, and how tourism had a real civic pride feel to it in Belfast. So when the cruise ships come in, or the tour buses coming on, or the independent visitors backpacking around the city and looking at murals and uncovering their very own Belfast, that's largely been gone for the last 18 months. And I think that's being missed by local people. So I think that civic and social impact of tourism has been brought more apparent in the last 18 months also, as well.
Right, okay, we're going to go to a series of questions now, and in recognition of time, asking our panelists to be as precise and concise in their answers as they can. But I want to develop some of these themes. So Harry's just linked this back, Noreen, to the point that you made about the work-life balance. And the question I'm going to ask you all is, what are specific opportunities that you see for Belfast in the rebuilding of tourism? And maybe, I hope I'm not being unfair, Noreen, but perhaps it's time to reflect on, what's tourism's role in this work-life balance, and what are those opportunities, please?
Yeah, I think Catherine made a very valid point there, Terry, when she spoke about the opportunity for Belfast in particular. And, the fact that Belfast is so close to nature, is so close, is so, accessible in itself, easy to get about, but also very close to green and good environments. And I think climate change, sustainability, community, hugely important. This has been, this hasn't been a shock to the world. This has been a trauma to the world in terms of COVID. And I think it has reset priorities. I think that it has affected all of us as individuals, as families, as communities, as organizations, the business, the economy, safety being at the heart of it all. But I think health and wellness are hugely important as we face into the future post-COVID for tourism. Privacy, data, managing data, technology and technological innovation, biometrics, being able to do things online, not having to have that piece of paper that you need. All of those things now are expectations. Before, I don't think there was that sense of we need to be somewhere else. We need to, think another way about it. Now, I think our travelers, our visitors, that's just become, the overused phrase, I know, but the new normal. It is not innovative anymore. Those things are expected. So I think that in terms of identifying what the opportunities are, they've got to be in line with what our visitors are thinking about. And I think the other thing that strikes me very much in this era is looking towards Gen Z. And, we know that Gen Z have a different approach to the world. They're much more activist based. They're much more concerned about the environment. And I think those influences are affecting every other demographic as well. And we need to be aware of them. And people are not just going to accept things in future. They're more thoughtful about things. Our health, our safety, our wellness have come to the fore. And we've got to deliver to those things as well as great experiences. And I think it's very important to remember that when we tick boxes as to what our visitors want, ultimately they want to have a good time. And we've got to ensure that the supports are there, the training is there, the opportunities are there for the industry to be able to respond and offer that really good time.
I mean, that sounds like an agenda for a meeting that you might be organizing, Catherine. How do you and your staff take those big ideas and start working them through into real experiences? What are you actually doing to actually respond to these challenges?
Like Noreen has said, I think that what COVID has done is made our visitors much more culturally and environmentally aware, much more health conscious, and looking for unique and authentic experiences. So and from our perspective, how do we connect them better to nature? How do we help them understand better biodiversity? How do we help them to get involved and provide those opportunities? So particularly at our open air museums, where we have a lot of green space, we've entered into new partnerships and thinking about doing things in new ways. So we're working with the conservation volunteers at the Ulster Folk Museum. They have been running green gyms and involving the local community and coming on to the site, and with volunteers being able to come and watch things grow, to plant things, to watch them grow through the seasons, and to provide those opportunities. That is right for tourists and for tourism as well. And I think increasingly responsible tourism sees people wanting to come to destinations and do something of value and to leave some kind of legacy. And so for us, those kind of opportunities, and I think are real opportunities for a new type of tourism that's going to hopefully be travelling to Northern Ireland in the future.
I think that's really interesting, because what you're then moving into is that point about blurring. When does a museum stop becoming a museum, become a gym and a fitness thing? Of course you'll always be a museum, but the offer you make may be much more hybrid. That's where that's moving. And Chris, I mean, you're located on a part of the city where you look east and you can see the hills and greenery. What are you doing to take these opportunities, connecting your residents and of course your visitors then to this wider nature? And that's probably a question I'll ask you as well, Harry, because you're that two sides of the city, two different axes into nature and countryside. Are you taking those opportunities?
I mean, absolutely. I mean, I should have maybe said more at the start. I mean, the Conswater Community Greenway, which is effectively the catalyst that we needed to develop East Side tourism, and everything sort of spawned from there. That was a major £40 million project between Belfast City Council and Big Lottery and ourselves. And that was all about regenerating place through the celebration of rivers and green spaces and parks, and linking parks through off-road cycling and walking routes. I mean, it was very much nature, health and well-being, livability, all massively at the heart of that. And that, like I say, has actually almost tourism as a byproduct, because that was fundamentally for local people, for residents. And the one thing that maybe is a slight, we've fallen short slightly on, is the fact that we branded it Conswater Community Greenway, because it automatically made it feel like, well, it's just for the community, that's not for visitors. Whereas we're managing to break that down now and actually celebrate it for a real asset for the city, all over the city. And actually, with the new glider route linking east and west, you know, everybody's enjoying the Conswater Greenway. And also, actually, there's now further development in the west of the city and in the north, looking at other greenway developments. And I think that's the one thing I would just say on this, Terry, and it's slightly off script, but you talked before about disruption, and disruption sometimes maybe makes people almost think about the displacement. And I know you didn't mean it that way, because it's not displacement in my view either. It's how do we enhance the city and rebalance. And when we do open up again, it's more balanced, and everything that we're doing as part of the city is enhancing each other. So there's a strong city centre, there's strong neighbourhoods, and actually that green ethos is kind of instilled across the city. And I think sometimes we're a bit guilty of looking further afield for examples of green infrastructure that have made transformational impacts. And in East Belfast, you know, let's not look too far down the road, because, you know, what the Greenway has done for East Belfast has been transformational. Just in terms of self-esteem, civic pride, you know, we talk about measurables, and then we might talk about that later, but health and well-being and tourism maybe wouldn't necessarily go hand in hand, but they should, because it's really tourism, heritage, health, well-being, livability, it all is interlinked and massively important. So couldn't agree more. And the only thing I would say on green tourism is that, and sort of outdoors tourism, is it doesn't stop at daytime. I think we need as a city to develop our nighttime green tourism as well, and what we can do outdoors in the evening. And then let's see if we can push the boundaries as well in the autumn and winter, and get people wrapped up and still do things outdoors and open air, because I think that'll be a real challenge, but something I would like to see courage from everybody on to try and make it happen.
Very fair comments. And I think the idea of the 24/7 city, 365 city is going to be an imperative. So Harry, what sort of opportunities are you seeing and you're taking now that you think will be, you know, pursued and still relevant over the next few years? This connection with the outdoors, connection with health and well-being.
Yeah, very much so. I mean, we're just about to launch, and it's something we've done a lot of research during COVID, particularly over the last 9 or 10 months, when we see the likes of the National Trust property on Belfast Hills, and Belfast being the unique contradictory city that it is. The top of the Belfast Hills was once owned by the Ministry of Defence as a place for target practice, and it's now owned rightfully so in public ownership with the National Trust. And it's a wonderful 10 kilometres of walkways, literally at the roof of the city overlooking it, once attributed to or described in line with Tabletop Mountain in South Africa, if I'm getting that right. But certainly in West Belfast, we're launching this new thematic experience called Open Hills and Open Hearts. So yes, you do have, in some respects, some densely populated areas, but as Noreen mentioned earlier on, within a short walk and a short distance, you can be in a greenway, you can be in a UNESCO protected wetland site in the Bog Meadows that literally sits cheek by jowl by the M1 motorway. You know, where else in the world do you get a motorway, then a UNESCO protected wetland site with all sorts of migrating birds landing each year, owned by the Ulster Wildlife Trust and protected by them. And of course, then we have the new development at Colin Glen Forest Park, which, you know, people with young families will walk the Gruffalo Trail, which I'm in at most weekends, but right through till Belfast's first, or Ireland's first, sorry, alpine coaster called the Black Bull. So from the top of the Colin Glen up to 40 miles per hour through the flora and fauna in a very eco-friendly and environmentally way, you can, you know, very much have that urban adventure right in the doorstep of the city, also known as Belfast Green Lung. So from the Bog Meadows to the Falls Park, right up onto the Belfast hills, through the most wonderful green space, through the most densely populated part of the city. So Belfast has all of that. And I think what's really interesting, if you look back at last summer 2020, when we opened up ever so slightly for a short period of time, Belfast hotels didn't really get the shot in the arm that perhaps they expected, and hotels lying outside of Belfast and seemed to be more rural areas and guest houses and B&Bs and places like that, and accommodation offering like that, you couldn't have got a spot on it. But this summer, Belfast hotels seem to be doing a lot better, and I think that's because we've realised that we need to shout more from a Belfast perspective about our open hills and about our open hearts and about how accessible we actually are to that urban rural transition and how easy that is. So there's lots of space in Belfast, there's lots of greenery, there's lots of walkways, and as Chris rightfully said, the big challenge for us is how do we articulate that and open that up 24/7 in a creative, ambitious way. And that's the big challenge for us, and a huge opportunity going forward also.
Well, you're all splendid advocates for your wonderful city. Did I mishear you then? Did you say you were the Gruffalo on the trail? Or Catherine, can I come to you now? I'd like to, I mean, you've all touched on all sorts of things, and you've mentioned the good things that are already happening. So as chair of Visit Belfast with that hat on, can you begin to help us paint a picture of what success in might look like in Belfast in, say, 5 years' time? What are you envisaging this reimagined city for tourists could look like?
I think, Terry, I touched on quite a bit of it, and I think Chris's comments are very valid. One thing that COVID has done is it's driven everybody outside. You've had to go outside to socialise, and as I've often said over the last year, there's no such thing as bad weather, just the wrong clothes. And I think that when people are outside, it makes the city feel much more alive and much more vibrant. And for me, for Belfast, there's some simple things that we really need to focus on fixing. So the city needs to be clean. The city needs to be warm, friendly. People need to feel that welcome on the street, not to see people doing antisocial type activities on the streets. Those are really simple things. But also the city needs to be, I guess, pedestrianisation. It needs to have a cafe culture. It needs to have more open spaces. In the Linen Quarter, there's a really interesting parklet that's been put in place in the city centre, which is fantastic. But I think there's so many more opportunities like that to make the city feel more warm, welcoming and vibrant 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. There's a real challenge at the moment with the city being incredibly quiet, particularly during the evenings, during the early part of the week, and maybe a slightly busier at the weekend. But I think that there are very simple things that collectively we need to work together to sort. I think I've heard you refer to them in the past, Terry, as the hygienics, and I think that there really needs to be a focus and over the next 5 years on those hygienics. And I think the city then will have a platform from which it can really come alive, and that therefore gives a stage for culture, arts, heritage, for animation at all different levels to take off within the city. So that's kind of where I would like to see the city going over the very short to medium term, which is 5 years. Longer term, there's more things that we could do in terms of the new destination hub that the City Council are going to invest in, which will be fantastic. But I do think in the short term, there's a lot of simple things that we could fix quickly within the city.
So for you, as the rocket scientist said, it ain't rocket science. Harry, you called it, the unique contradictory city. I actually don't see any of you contradicting what Catherine has said, unless you want to. Or what I'd like you to do is to perhaps expand on what Catherine said. Is there a need to go beyond getting those simple things right sooner in the process? So, Chris.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm looking at myself there. Looks like I'm about to spontaneously combust here, but it is quite warm. Quite wearing a fleece wasn't the best idea.
It's okay. We'll cool you down a bit. Is that better?
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And in fact, I can't really be contradictory to anything anyone said so far on the call. I would just say that I would like to see, I suppose we're all, in Eastside, we're always talking about getting under the layers of things. And I would like to see the city be more confident and comfortable in its own skin, maybe, and just be, I mean, we're the capital city of the country, and maybe proudly and confidently go out there with a message, but maybe that's working out what our key message is at first and then going out there with it. I think that we've talked a lot, and there's been massive, like, there's been massive mindset shifts at all levels here in terms of green recovery and sustainable tourism, and linking in other pillars of environmental and social aspects. And but one thing that I maybe think we haven't done yet, maybe just because we haven't had the opportunity, is how do we market that? And actually, I think rather than, Belfast is a great place to come shopping, I actually think we should maybe start thinking about how we look at those key development opportunities as key marketing hooks as well. And we've all talked about it, and I think we're all on the same page, but it takes a bit of confidence to go out there now to the market and say, actually, we're a city that is, we know where we've been, we know where we've come from, that's shaped this city in many ways, but here's confidently how we're looking to the future with full of energy and positivity and enthusiasm. And I think that's a slight tack of direction for our city marketing, but I think it would really resonate now more than ever with people. I mean, you talked a wee bit, Terry, very early on there about purposeful travel and people coming with cause in mind, and I actually think that would actually lend itself to that element as well. So yeah, more of the same, but maybe also in the city marketing as well, I think would be really useful.
Okay, that's very interesting, Harry. So Chris is saying, picking up the sailing parlance, tacking, the winds of change are there. You've got to tack the boat in a slightly different way in your messaging, and be confident about it. I mean, you've never been knowingly lacking in confidence, Harry, but is that a key point for Belfast as a whole, this moving forward with confidence?
I'll give you just one very brief example. Anecdotally, talking to some of the bar owners and stuff in town for the last number of weeks, they've been rammed with people from the south coming to Belfast, right? Quite simply because in the south, the bars are still closed in terms of getting the drink and food inside, unless you're staying in a hotel. So Kelly's, Madden's, traditional Belfast bars, Dirty Onion, Cathedral Quarter, rammed with people from the south. Now, very practically, they want to come up and sit inside and have drinks and enjoy. All right. So Belfast only very recently has really begun to sell itself right across the island of Ireland. And Tourism and I done a powerful bit of research, I think about 2 years ago. Catherine, you maybe keep me right, 3 years ago, looking at, defining it, I think, as a sleeping giant, and it's a huge opportunity. Féile, in our last sort of numbers of weeks, 2 weeks into our last number of weeks leading into Féile, we decided that we would put some billboards in Galway, we would put some billboards in Cork, and we would really try and sell Belfast and sell the 10 days of Féile and that festival experience right across the island. So that's just one opportunity. Chris talking about being comfortable on our skin, to really promote ourselves right across the island on a par with Cork and Galway and Dublin and the rest of it. So a huge opportunity there. But I want to just share with you, you mentioned earlier on, Terry, a benchmarking study that we recently commissioned, both Eastside and Fáilte Feirste Thiar, the top 3 findings from that, because I think it's very relevant for today's conversation. 1, Belfast community neighbourhood tourism models are sustainable, resilient, and highly appropriate for the new post-COVID world of urban tourism. So that's recognising that, the old way and the old approach to, Phobail have a great saying, more than the Guggenheim. And I think it's really high time that as we move forward in Belfast, that the social and economic benefits of tourism are maximised at the local level. The second point was Belfast models are very much comparable and stand the test of international best practice, but there's still more to be achieved. Belfast, I think, is only starting out when you compare it and benchmark it to other European best practice models and British and Irish best practice models also. And we're still very much growing up as a destination. So there's a huge opportunity to consolidate and to really push on. But thirdly, I think is most prevalent to this conversation, and it's this point: sustainable urban tourism is no longer desirable, it is essential. And that whole approach and shift to a more sustainable tourism model, not just the green, but the social, the economic, the governance, and all of that combined, I think is the real opportunity to Belfast for Belfast and the wider region, and indeed Ireland as we move forward.
Well, Noreen, you've listened to the comments of 3 people from Belfast. Before you comment on that, Catherine would like to add something, but Noreen, perhaps you'd like to reflect on how you see the opportunities for Belfast. Catherine.
I think I just wanted to maybe reflect on what Harry has said, and certainly from our perspective at Visit Belfast, I think Belfast is already known as being world leading in things like cybersecurity, fintech, in advanced manufacturing. And I think there's a real opportunity for us to emerge from COVID as being a world leading destination in sustainable tourism. We have assets that other cities would kill for, given the proximity that we've already talked to about the green spaces and the hills and the coastline to the city centre. And I think that this is, if you ask me where we want to be in 5 years, Terry, I think we want to be a world leading sustainable tourism destination.
Okay, are they capable of doing that, Noreen?
Absolutely, Terry. In fact, reflecting on what Harry was just saying, I think you will be hard pressed to find a person under 25 in the south who hasn't been to the north in the last 2 months. I mean, it is on everyone's lips, and the experiences anecdotally have been really positive. And if you think about sustainability, the environment, this generation Z, as we talk about them, you know, they expect brands to represent their values. And 61% of Gen Z, and that's 2.1 billion young people born between 2010 and, or sorry, between 1995 and 2010, but 61% of them say they will pay more for products and services produced in an ethical or sustainable way. Now, that's a massive shift from previous generations. If we look at the current stats that tell us only 1 to 2% of people who fly pay for carbon offsetting, you know, we're looking at a generation that is really putting climate, environment front and center, and that sustainable message, that message of community being involved in sustainability, is at the heart of a tourism offering. And I think Belfast is really well positioned to do that. The only other thing I would add is that looking to the future, connectivity is hugely important. We live on an island, you know, and maintaining our connectivity with GB, with Europe, with the United States is really essential for us as we come out of COVID, and ensure that we keep that relevance for all of the good initiatives that we are talking about in terms of sustainability and the environment.
Absolutely. I'm very conscious of time, and I think I'd like to ask you to comment on kind of 2 questions rolled into one so that we can stick to our time allocation. But what is the role of the public sector in helping you achieve these goals? And associated with that, everyone, it seems, is reporting on the challenge of finding appropriate numbers and skilled people to work in the hospitality and tourism industry. And so if you don't mind, could you give your answers to those 2 questions? And Chris, I'll kick off with you, then come to Harry, then Noreen, and end with Catherine on that. So role of the public sector, and how do we tackle this issue of shortage of skills, talent, whatever we want to call it?
Yeah, okay. Well, so I think from the role of it actually dovetails very nicely in from the last question as well. I mean, I think in many ways the public sector need to lead, but confidently lead by example. I mean, Catherine talking about the environmental sustainability. You know, we are an island, but actually let's embrace that. I know people need to fly here and get boats, but let's put together a world leading offset program bespoke for Northern Ireland. You know, I think that's a Northern Ireland wide conversation, and Belfast can come and really strengthen that. I think in many ways, so the public sector need to lead in that regard, but then also they need to enable and to empower the likes of our own organisations and others across the city. But for that, there needs to be trust. And I do appreciate that sometimes public sector systems and trust are difficult to combine, but I do think I have to say I am more positive than I've ever been in the role of the public sector in changing focus and the ethos slightly, and actually handing over an element of trust and empowerment to other people. For me, you know, more trust, more engagement at a local level ultimately leads to more freedom, more opportunities for innovation, more opportunities for positive impact. Which is what we all want to achieve. So I do think that is a difficult thing to find, but actually really, really impactful when we can find it. And there are people that we know, that we all know, that are within the public sector system who are flying the flag and fighting for change. And I think we as an industry need to back them and support them. And I think there's more than ever. There's people in the systems, and I actually am feeling very positive about it. In terms of the excuse me, in terms of the second question about workforce, I think for a long time tourism and hospitality has maybe been seen a little bit as a stopgap, and certainly the hospitality operators I've worked with, and we have cafe operators and restaurant operators, and now there's a new bar opening in East Belfast. So, but the ones that really nail it are the ones that see tourism and hospitality as a career, and they really take their development and the development of their staff massively serious, and from a career point of view. And I know this is something that Colin and Hospitality Ulster is hugely a huge advocate of as well. And I think we need to change that the emphasis that tourism and hospitality can actually be a real career choice, and one which will make a real impact for people's lives, you know, as we all pull together through this. So yeah, I think that would be the standout for me.
Okay, thank you. Interestingly, the Secretary General of the World Tourism Organization has recently said trust is the new currency in tourism, and that's trust on all dimensions. Harry, what's your reflection on this role of the public sector and addressing this potential skills employment issue?
Yeah, so firstly, in the public sector piece, I think Chris is absolutely right in terms of that leadership role. I mean, Catherine chairs Visit Belfast, a wonderful organisation doing tremendous work, and a great sort of senior leadership team, and it always manages to pull together a fairly representative board of the entire city. And I suppose while it's a public-private partnership, I think it's a great example of the public sector showing leadership and forging ahead with that wider strategic view of Team Belfast and our cities, sort of, when we're talking about that. But the public sector for me should be the catalyst, almost the convener, creating the space and the opportunity for people to engage. I remember you saying, Terry, a number of years ago, let the creatives collide, you know, let the business person and the private sector meet with the artist, let the artist meet with the public sector, put them in a room and see what happens, and let them get on with it. And I think that's the role of the public sector, not always trying to gatekeep or wrap up in red tape, but allowing those creatives to collide and to push on and go on with it. In terms of, you know, the challenges facing tourism and hospitality, you know, anecdotally, we can speak to any, you know, I'm here today in the James Connolly Centre. We have a very small cafe in comparison, and we've had our own issues and difficulties in terms of a staff and the challenges associated with hospitality staff, and there's a real shortage of it. I think it's compounded by COVID and out working on that. It's also compounded by Brexit and all of the issues that come with that. So there's no easy fix for it. But I think Chris is absolutely spot on, and those umbrella organisations such as Hospitality Ulster are absolutely spot on as well in terms of the tourism and hospitality industry in particular almost being a calling. You know, we've all wonderful experience of hospitality, and we can see that people have worked there for many years, and it's almost like a trade. It's an apprenticeship. You know, when you think back to old Belfast, people would have said they served a trade or they served an apprenticeship in some of the bars. You know, that's largely gone now, but I think it needs to be seen as a real career opportunity. The challenge for the industry then is to meet those expectations. The amount of people that I've spoken to, even again anecdotally, that are during COVID that want a career change, that want to engage with real people and meet people, and would love to be trained as a barista and are looking to do that opportunity or to pull the best pint of Guinness and whatever else, rather than to be working in a modern day factory floor or whatever else they may be. So people are shifting and changing, and it's that fluidness piece and that elasticity that we talked about and the paradigms at the very start of today's conversation. So there's challenges for everyone and all of that. But for us to do what we can do, we need to make this industry as attractive as it can be. And that includes, you know, hours, that includes salary and pay and working conditions and all the whole broad gambit of all of that.
Yeah, I'm very pleased you've raised that. There is an industry obligation to make work in the industry a little bit more moral and ethical as well, you know. Noreen, what's your reflection on this before we invite Catherine to kind of bring these thoughts together.
Yeah, I cannot disagree with any of the points made by Chris or by Harry. I think there is an obligation there on public and private to come together. And I think, in fairness, through the absolute shock horror of COVID, industry and government have come together to try and protect as much as possible, and try to figure a way through this survival phase, and to keep as many businesses as possible going, so that we will have a viable and exciting tourism product to offer post-COVID. So I think to use that energy to think in terms of the future and what else could be done. Training is hugely important. I mean, in order for people to see a career path, there's got to be that training. And I think the point that you made, Harry, about, bringing the storytellers, bringing the, people who can really connect with visitors into the environment, whether they want to be, working in bars or working in coffee shops or wherever it is, but showing them a viable career path. The other thing I think we have to address, and perhaps industry more than anything, is that post-COVID, it's a cashless society. So how do we reward these people? How do we ensure that they get the gratuities, that they get the tips, that there are incentives there for them to see this as a good career going forward? So I think, lots of new challenges being thrown up, but I feel very confident that what I'm seeing through this pandemic, serves us well in terms of thinking innovatively about how to address them in future.
Yep, lots of new challenges, Catherine.
I have nothing new to add to the discussion, but for me, fundamentally, the public sector needs to move from being the doer and the controller to the enabler and the facilitator. They need to let go and they need to trust, and the industry needs to then step up. And I think that's critical for the future. From a skills and resourcing perspective, I completely agree that the tourism needs to be painted as a career path, and it needs to be articulated much better than it is at the moment. From the public sector side, there needs to be an investment in skills development, that people are being appropriately trained and equipped to go into the sector. And from the industry side, there needs to be, and hopefully, or perhaps the current challenge, particularly around staffing and recruiting, will be a bit of a wake-up call, because the industry needs to respond by ensuring that that there's a more morally and ethically responsible in terms of the types of jobs that are being offered within the sector. So that's it, Terry. I don't have anything new to add, but that's my kind of summary.
I think that's a wonderful clarion call, Catherine. And I love the idea of the public sector becoming the big can of WD-40, rather than the stopper in the sink sort of thing. I came across a local government officer just recently who said, our job is, if we can't remove the hurdles, we reduce the height of the hurdles that have to be jumped over. And I think that's, fundamentally part of this shift. So thank you all very much indeed. I'd like to leave you with a couple of thoughts. First of all, I see what you've been calling Generation Z almost mirroring the baby boomers. The people my age who were the original revolutionaries are much closer to the ambitions and interests of the Generation Z than those in between. And I think that makes for interesting cross-generational opportunities, grandparents with grandkids and so on. But I do think we're saying goodbye to the ageist stuff anymore. Stop thinking of market segmentation and start thinking of market motivation and so on. But I like the words that you all use, the need for confidence, consistency, trust. And you certainly have an ambition that, in my experience of Belfast since 1970, has never really been missing. As an outsiders, as I am and Noreen, I suppose we wish you every success and best wish in fulfilling those ambitions, and perhaps in 5 years' time, testing you back as to whether these things that you've just described actually happened. And if they did, we'll celebrate. And if they didn't, we'll hold you to account. But thank you very much indeed. Good luck with Féile this year. And to all our panelists, thank you very, very much indeed.